Welcome to today's story. Have a good time. Listen, Mark, it is really simple. Either use the hydrogen peroxide or don't. The choice is yours. Mark blanched slightly, wavered momentarily, grabbed the brown bottle, carefully looked at the label and began reading. Perhaps it wouldn't be as bad as he imagined. Purified water, check. Hydrogen peroxide 3%, check. Directions: clean the affected area. Apply a small amount of product 1 to 3 times a day, check. Warning: keep out of reach of children. No problem. For external use only, check. Mark pondered. Perhaps Ginny's request wasn't that bad an idea after all. It had been quite a while since he'd had sex with anyone, and the only person who'd handled his penis in quite some time was his doctor and himself. For Ginny, it had been 30 years since she'd last had her hands on a penis or had one enter any of her orifices. She was somewhat reluctant to break her abstinence, and yet there was something about Mark that sorely tested her resolve to leave the damn things alone. Ginny had been married twice and so had developed an up-close and personal relationship with each husband's genitals. Her first husband, a Dutchman, was not very fastidious about cleaning his apparatus. Ginny was young and rather innocent, and several years younger than her domineering partner. She really had no idea that his demands for sex were anything she could control, and asking him to bath first was unimaginable to her. He wasn't a very generous lover, and once his needs were satisfied, grunted with satisfaction, rolled off Ginny and fell sound asleep. The act itself held some pleasure for her, but for the most part became a tedious task of enduring his efforts to achieve orgasm. She knew exactly how many holes were in each of the ceiling tiles above her head. Good sex had her hole count under 1,000. Anything after that, she simply zoned out from the experience and began planning how she could get the ice cream out of the freezer without Tony waking up. Their marriage didn't last very long, and she was grateful for the respite from the endless vaginal infections suffered from exposure to his rather unhygienic washing habits. After they separated, she lost a lot of weight, began drinking heavily, and played the bar scene rather ruthlessly. It was the early 1970s, and the free exchange of sexual activity was not as frowned upon as it had been in her earlier years. Ginny began to experiment. She rather enjoyed the process and decided perhaps penis weren't as bad as she'd imagined. The problem was that, like her drinking, one never seemed to be enough. So, after a year of experimenting, she decided to quit. She'd kept careful tabs of the number of encounters and had managed to keep the count down to the digits on her hands. She knew if she began on her toes, that she would never stop and that a dim future was in store for her. So with firm resolve, she made a number of changes in her life. She joined a religion that forbade its members to use alcohol and other drugs, frowned upon the use of tobacco, and had strict laws regarding the guarding of one's chastity. No sex unless married. In one foul swoop, Ginny solved several problems. The biggest task in front of her was to find a husband, thus ensuring her chances of once again having access to a penis. Well, as she'd managed to keep her weight down, she found the perfect candidate. A good Catholic boy, who though had a history of promiscuous behavior was agreeable to settling down to marriage and begin a family with Ginny. He had a very nice penis and an admirable grasp of how to use it. They were quite happy for several years, produced 3 children, and though the seeds of destruction were present, Ginny failed to observe carefully. She hid much, and so did her husband Joe. Their marriage ended in catastrophe, with Ginny licking her wounds for several years, vowing to be much more careful in future attempts to handle any male apparatus. Somehow the years passed. It wasn't that she was adverse to having another relationship, she just was extremely cautious. She sorely missed having a penis in her life, but managed to find other substitutes, and somehow she came to discover that a penis, detached from a body, gave as much pleasure as one on a body. The added bonus was that her lovely latex lover was much easier to clean and made very few demands upon her time once its job was accomplished. Over the years, she made several attempts to seriously check out the market. In her late 60s, she met a delectable male who smelled deliciously like butterscotch. She did her best to entice him to have sex with her, but for some unknown reason he was reluctant to enter fully into the game. She tried for several years to tempt him and finally gave up, believing that she was destined to spend her remaining years penis-free. In her early 70s, she once again was tempted. She met Mark in the alley behind her apartment. She was out in her garden when he wandered by, stopped to chat, and they struck up an immediate friendship. Mark was only 55, and though Ginny felt the magnetism of sexual attraction to him, managed to subdue any carnal inclinations with the realization that he could be her child. Unfortunately, the feelings she began to have for him were anything but maternal. They managed to make it to her bed. She emerged after 1 hour and he several hours later. It had begun quite innocently with her offering to give him a massage and check out what was going on with his kidney. One thing led to another. She finished the treatment, covered his snoring body with a warm blanket, and tiptoed out of the room and into her kitchen to continue on with her baking. When Mark appeared in the doorway several hours later, he announced that he'd had the best sleep he'd had in ages. He was amazed that he'd been out that long. Ginny smiled. She knew full well the powers of her bed and shared them with very few. To date, her grandchildren and on occasion, her grown daughter, were the only human beings who'd been allowed to experience the miraculous healing powers of her magic palette. Her relationship with Mark expanded. She eventually informed him of her non-maternalistic feelings towards him, and he seemed quite comfortable with the idea of advancing to another level. The end came when she informed him of her requirements to have sex with her, have a bath and thoroughly wash his hair and brush his teeth, allow her to administer a careful examination of his penis and to gently rinse it with hydrogen peroxide. Mark was at first reluctant, but soon warmed to the plan and agreed to the conditions. Ginny, in the meantime, was having second thoughts. She valued her independence highly and was reluctant to enter into any relationship that interfered with that. It wasn't that she was adverse to having a sexual relationship, only that she was hesitant to deal with all the baggage that came with it. She left Mark her phone number and said to call her in a few days. Somehow, she wasn't surprised when the call never came. Life went on much as before. She began dreaming of herds of pennis roaming freely across the range in search of refuge from the storm. She painted a few, sculpted a few, and had a lot of fun with her faithful companion, Victor, a lovely pink latex vibrator that was always up to an adventure and rarely failed to do the job at hand. Best of all, he went into a drawer when the job was done. After being cleaned with hydrogen peroxide, many more years passed. Ginny may or may not have found more live pennis, and yet her life was complete and filled each day with adventure after adventure. She woke daily with a deep sense of gratitude for having been given such a bountiful life, and before her feet hit the ground, humbly begged her higher power to show her the best direction for the day and the strength to carry out his plans. Came the day she never woke up to this plane of existence. She'd gone to bed early, and strangely enough, her final thoughts had been of Mark and the lovely hours they'd spent together those many years before. The last thing she remembered was looking at the hydrogen peroxide on her bedside table and sighing with satisfaction, remembering her recent romp with her honey, Victor. The next thing she knew, she was in front of a beautiful set of pearly gates. The Great One hovered before her, smiling lovingly as he welcomed her inside. She bowed her head as he said, "Listen, Ginny, I'm going to make an exception in your case and allow you to bring one of your earthly possessions inside." Jin looked down, and lo and behold, at her feet was "Listen, I'm going to tell you a story. There once was an old man who lived by himself in a dark forest. He hated water in large quantities and so lived in a place where the only water came from shallow pans scattered around his property. Every morning he walked to the poplar tree and carried the blue tin bowl inside. After making a weak rust-colored tea, he would splash the remaining water over his head and sprinkle a little bit over his armpits. At night, he walked to the spruce tree and carried the yellow plastic bowl inside. For food, he ate tinned green beans and instant mashed potatoes. For entertainment, he had a portable hand-cranked radio that, when the skies were clear, received 2 stations very clearly and 1 station muffled by static. He wasn't stupid, this old man. He was willing to suffer a little but not too much to humor his madness. There's a lesson in there for you. A boy came upon the shack. He knocked on the door and the door didn't open. The old man was listening to the radio and his eyes were closed. He might have been sleeping. On the table was a half-eaten bowl of white mush. The radio was playing Spanish jazz. "Old man," the boy shouted. The old man opened his eyes and then closed it again. "Old man," the boy shouted and for good measure kicked the door. The door opened. The old man stood shirtless in the doorway. "Put some clothes on," the boy said. He came in and turned off the radio. While the old man was digging through a pile of rags in the corner, the boy took out a long oblong shape wrapped in brown butcher paper from the plastic bag he was carrying. The old man put on a dirty white shirt and tried to use his hands to smooth out the wrinkles. "Here, eat this," the boy said. "I just ate," the old man said. "Eat this," the boy said. So the old man did. He unwrapped a hunk of meat from the butcher paper. Sprinkling some oil on a cast iron pan, he fried the entire thing and ate it without salt or bread. The boy sat by him turning the now useless buttons on the radio. They didn't talk. The only sound was from fork hitting plate, knife sawing through flesh, ill-fitting dentures chewing on tough gristle. "Clean up," the boy said after the old man was done. So the old man went outside and buried the butcher paper under the spruce tree, the fork and knife under the poplar. When he came back, the boy was already gone. The old man should have been relieved, but he wasn't. The next day a man knocked on the door, which promptly opened to reveal the old man standing in the doorway in a yellowed shirt and frayed black pants. There was a strong smell of onions and must. All people who live alone have to be vigilant against this odor, but the old man had ceased to notice it for a long time now, or perhaps he had ceased to care. It is hard to tell the difference with him sometimes. "Hello, sir, may I come in?" the man asked. The two of them sat down at the kitchen table, the man sitting where the boy sat yesterday. "How are you doing, sir?" the man asked. "Well enough," the man said. "I heard that he came to see you yesterday." "He did come yesterday, but only for a short while." "Did he bring anything with him?" "Nothing but some meat. It was good meat." "What did he bring it in?" If you were listening, you would remember that the old man wasn't stupid. He wasn't going to tell this man anything important. "I don't remember," he said. "Some bag. It's not here now. He must have taken it back with him." The man nodded. He seemed to have been expecting this answer because he smiled. "How do you get water out here?" the man asked. The old man explained his system. The man asked more questions. Why did the old man hate large bodies of water so much? Where had he come from? What was his youth like? The old man talked and talked and talked until his tongue numbed and his words came out slurred and syncopated. "I would love to see your property," the man said. The old man wasn't stupid. He wasn't going to show this man anything important. "It's nothing," he said, "nothing but trees." "What kind of trees?" The old man described the beauty and variety of the temperate rainforest where poplars, spruces and birches came together to live in harmony in a damp and misty atmosphere. "There's no place like this in the world," he said. "I fell in love with the sound of my own movements." "I love trees," the man said. "I used to climb apple trees when I was younger." The old man said he used to climb trees as well, and broke a few bones doing so. They compared broken bones. The old man got up and showed the man a long scar on his side. They talked for a long time. When it got dark, the man shook the old man's hand and left. The old man should have been relieved, but he wasn't. The next morning, expecting a visitor, he used water from the blue tin bowl to wash his shirts and pants. While they laid damp and drying on a chair, he sat naked and shivering at the kitchen table. Someone knocked on the door. "Open up, I know you're in there." He sipped his rust-colored tea and waited. The knocking continued for a couple of minutes and then it stopped. The old man touched the sleeve of his shirt, still damp. A couple more hours to go. The knocking started up again. The old man turned his head, as if listening to a faraway noise.